Anyone that's been to an audio show in the last 5 years has likely run across a system from Audio Group Denmark, the Scandinavian company founded by former Raidho designers Lars, Kristensen, and Børresen that is a union of 4 HiFi brands: Ansuz, Aavik, Børresen and Axxess. Audio Group Denmark have marketed themselves heavily as being at the cutting edge of technology across amplification, speaker design, and accessories such as cables and noise control devices. This forward-thinking mindset has led them to the realm of universal streaming amplifiers, of which the Aavik U-288, right beside me here, is one of the latest iterations of. At $30,000, it is priced in the aspirational luxury end of the segment, promising to be that kind of destination at the end of your hi-fi journey. Can Aavik deliver on that promise? Well, stay tuned to find out.
This is the introduction of Series S, and this is the biggest, baddest Series S's that we've ever produced. What Series S is to us is the core essence of our line. This is kind of the heart of REL. These are the best S's in every sense of the word. They play louder, they go deeper, they hit faster, they hit harder. Experience the new Series S. You're going to be blown away.
The Aavik U-288 is the middle child of the latest series of streaming amplifiers from Audio Group Denmark. The U in U-288 stands for Unity Amplifier and represents the combination of preamplifier, power amp, DAC, streamer, all in one chassis. The U-288 is hardly alone in this all-in-one design. The one-box amplifier solution has been an ever-crowded market for years now. And on this channel alone, I've reviewed similar streaming amps from the likes of Name, Hagel, and others, albeit in a vastly lower price category than this Danish design. The 8.8 range of Unity amplifiers boast a storied pedigree as they are the result of a recent collaboration between 2 Danish hi-fi industry titans, Flemming Rasmussen, the founder of Griffin Audio, and Audio Group Denmark's own Michael Børresen. For those that aren't in the loop, Griffin Audio has been at the forefront of pretty much absolute high-end for amplifier design for the last few decades. But the interesting thing is that Griffin audio amps have almost always been Class A circuits. The Aavik U-288, on the other hand, well, this is a Class D amplifier. The U-288 is rated by the manufacturer as outputting 300 watts per channel into 8 ohms and doubling neatly, putting out 600 watts per channel into 4 ohms. That's a lot of power and current for one chassis, especially in a streaming amplifier, even if it is a Class D amplifier. Most Class D amplifier circuits are implementations of a select few technology from a select few manufacturers, and Aavik have chosen to implement a module from Pascal Audio for their amplifier section. This latest Pascal module uses something they call UMAX switching modulation, which uses a sine wave for pulse width modulation to reduce high frequency noise. Because of this reduced noise, less output filtering is applied, allowing for a lower inductance. That lower inductance in turn allows for better damping factor meaning driver control, which on the U-288 is approximately 358 ohms. If that heady jargon didn't deter you, you may be interested to know that the U-288 also employs a chain of active Tesla coils in its circuitry. Aavik employ these coils, which are both mounted on the circuit board as well as printed in square coil configurations directly in the circuit board, to lower the noise floor. According to their explanation, they use the Tesla coils to send specific frequencies in antiphase with the goal of amplifying the signal while also eliminating noise. Is this scientifically sound physics? I have absolutely no idea. I went to music school. I can, however, tell you how to execute Baroque ornamentation based on the decade and national origin of the composition, the notes for which can be found in the written appendix to this review, release date pending TBD. Okay, this is the part where I think I'm supposed to say the Aavik U-288 surprised me right out of the box, but the truth is the U-288 surprised me because it didn't come in a box. Rather, the AGD rep delivered it to my apartment in a nifty flight case that could be easily handcuffed to your arm in the event you needed to flee the country with it. Despite being a Class D amp, the Aavik is seriously hefty at 50 pounds. A portion of that weight does come from the new chassis design of the U-series, which is almost entirely from solid copper rather than aluminum, although the company still uses aluminum in its side heat sinks right here. The chassis has another feature, which are indents on both the top and the bottom inside the feet for proprietary vibration control footers from Ansuz, their sister company. Audio Group Denmark was kind enough to supply me with a set of Ansuz Darks feet, which use steel ball bearings for vibration control and resonance control. Notice the indents on the top of the unit as well. These are for the Ansuz Darks feet. This amp can have other Aavik components stacked on top of it or under it. And you're often going to see these units at HiFi shows presented in a stack of multiple Aavik boxes. The front fascia of the U-288 is clean and simple with just 3 touch-sensitive buttons right here and a large and very legible text screen. You're also going to see the company's signature 76-step digital volume control. Now, I'm not normally a huge fan of these types of kind of free spinning digital volume knobs. I usually favor old school volume pods. However, this knob with its textured outer dial and smooth resistance, they make a pretty strong case for the newer technology. I'm not going to say it's my favorite volume knob of all time because right now that honor decidedly rests with the Accuphase E800S. But Aavik have made a pretty strong showing here. The digital screen is clear and legible from even far away, making reading the volume setting, the input, or the text of whatever song and artist you're streaming easy to read at any distance. The touch-sensitive buttons to the left of the screen control unit power, mute, and menu. The menu button primarily serves as a source selection button. You press it once and the display flashes. Once this happens, you can turn the volume knob to rotate between inputs. The U-288 is a digital focused design, and if that wasn't obvious from the front ergonomics, it should be within its DAC specs, which boast MQA compatible PCM resolution, which goes up to 32-bit 384 kilohertz, and DSD up to DSD 128. This unit can be connected via Ethernet or Wi-Fi, and as a streamer, it is compatible with a number of protocols, including Audio Group Denmark's own app, UPnP, DNLA, Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, and although it wasn't listed in the specifications, I was also able to use Qobuz Connect with this amplifier. If you're a Roon user, Aavik do not have Roon Ready certification in the U series just yet, but I hear that that is on the way at some point in the future. The process to get the certification for that is ongoing. On the rear of the unit, the U-288 has 4 digital inputs, USB optical toslink, and 2 BNC coaxial inputs. The unit also has 2 analog line level RCA inputs and 1 set of RCA preamp outputs, which have a usefully low output impedance of 50 ohms. Other connections on the rear include an Ethernet port, 2 USB-A inputs for Wi-Fi or digital storage media, and an RS-232 service port for firmware updates and, dealer service. I will note here in talking about these connections that many all-in-one kind of digital streaming amplifiers will actually convert their analog line level inputs to digital for the ease of processing. That was the case on the Name Unity Nova PE I've reviewed last year. But as far as I understand with the Aavik, they keep their analog connections analog throughout the signal path, and that's going to be good news for those of us that are analog purists, myself included. The amplifier also comes with a very finely finished remote, which contains most of the controls available on the amplifier with, I will say, fewer steps to access them. It's a little easier to change inputs with the remote than it is with the menu button and the wheel. This remote isn't winning any awards in terms of heft, but it is functional and looks far more attractive than a lot of hi-fi remotes I've seen. Setup with the U-288 was fairly straightforward, mostly because you have everything you need to play music within the unit itself. Audio Group Denmark were kind enough to supply the amp with an Ansuz high current power cable, and after that I just needed an Ethernet connection and speakers, and I was pretty much off to the races. I primarily used 2 sets of loudspeakers with the U-288. First, the Dynaudio Contour 20 Black Edition, which I reviewed earlier this year, and then my reference monitors, the Harbeth 30.2 XD. This amp was perhaps overkill for both speakers, which have retail prices under $10,000 each, but they're monitors I've come to know very well sonically. I also used the preamp outputs of the Aavik with 2 different subwoofers, the Rail T7X, which is mine, and the Dynaudio Sub 6, which I recently reviewed for this channel. While the Harbeths play nice with a wide variety of amps from 50 to 500 watts, the Dynaudios are very power hungry for their size. I really wanted to test what a high watt Class D design would do with them. And the Aavik definitely unleashed something in the Dynaudios that I haven't heard before, feeding the speakers the power and control that I think they badly crave. Before I get into minute musical examples, I'm just going to say this. The Aavik U-288 is a master of control. Control of bass, control of dynamics, control of dynamic thrust, control of noise. This amplifier is assured of itself and any speaker you could throw at it. I have not always been a vocal fan of Class D amplifiers in the past. They used to make me wince, even some very expensive ones. There was always this kind of giveaway that broke the illusion for me, that made me conscious that I wasn't getting all that power and current for free. The Aavik doesn't really have those trade-offs. It doesn't sound glassy in the upper mid-range, it doesn't force the treble at you, and it doesn't sacrifice instrumental body to achieve its impressive speed. That doesn't mean it doesn't have a sound character, though. It is a fast and detailed sounding amplifier. But the great news is that that isn't the only trick up its sleeve. It also is an intensely musical amplifier. I could hear those touches immediately with a song like Grace by Jeff Buckley, where the micro and macro dynamics were immediate from the first few notes of the drums. It had this incredibly quiet noise floor played with the U-288. It also helped the singer's voice emerge from the silence in a more intense and impactful way. I was getting all the instrumental and vocal detail as well. That detail remained even as I could hear the tracks swell in volume and intensity as it went on, making the music feel larger than life in my listening room. Those qualities remained even in something more stripped down like Tracy Chapman's Give Me One Good Reason, which had a very direct and live sounding presentation with this setup. Tracy's voice had some nice lower end definition and power that I missed on amps that made her delivery sound a little more maybe pretty. That was not the case here, and the track is very personal and intense, and the picking on her guitars sound live and edgy right in the room, almost like they're gonna feed back off the live monitors in the space in front of me. It's a presentation that it pushes the sound and the details and the immediacy right to the fore without sounding congested. I think, however, orchestral music is the real test of any component, though, and through Qobuz, I streamed the overture to Wagner's Flying Dutchman, performed by the Norwegian National Opera Orchestra. This track, along with other classical orchestra recordings that I demoed with the U-288, gave a sonic presentation that was more, I would say, front row rather than middle of the hall for an orchestral presentation. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your listening preferences, but it very much allowed me to hear more of the individual parts of the ensemble in greater clarity. That clarity extended to tone color, I think, where individual wind instruments, whether expanding out of the texture for a solo or part of the crescendo of the ensemble, had this very unique and well-rendered individual character. There were some elements that felt very real and satisfying to me, especially in the top end where instruments had a very natural quality of sparkle and decay. And that's not just an impressive feature for a Class D amp, it's an impressive feature for any amplifier. But there were other times when the cleanliness and detail of the Aavik maybe weren't what the doctor ordered, such as with passages in the low brass that to me sounded a little bit too clean and lacked a bit of rich grunt and heft to them. The initial impact was there. I mean, I definitely felt the impact of the low brass when they had their entrances, but I didn't really feel it past that initial transient hit in quite the same way as I felt on other equipment I've had in this system. To be honest though, I think this amp shines best on more energetic, more maybe produced music is a good term to use. A good example of this is the song Emergence by British band Sleep Token. This is a song that kind of walks the line between pop, EDM, and metal, which sounds like it could be bad and gimmicky, but the songwriting and production managed this balancing act, I think, with grace. There is so much studio work into even things like the opening vocal verse, where at times the vocalist has filters applied, there's some subtle doubling going on, and other times there's a raw, natural quality to the voice and a purity of the singer's delivery. When electronics, or when the full band enter rather, the impact is not only huge, but the transients are, I mean, there's a lot of like artificial sharpness and start-stop in this song, and the starts and the stops and the silences and the entrances and the impact, it all moves energetically and on a dime. And this has been a hi-fi test track for me since it came out this year, but the Aavik U-288 gave it one of the most exciting and engaging sonic presentations I've ever heard. If this is the kind of music you like, that has heavy electronics, fast transients, and really relies on speed and agility, this is definitely going to be an amplifier you're going to want to try out. Perhaps there's probably a reason behind this. The Audio Group Denmark like to demo their equipment with a lot of EDM and techno whenever I see them at industry shows, because I do think that music suits the sonics of this gear very, very well. I'll be honest, judging a component this expensive is kind of nerve-wracking, because I do have to hold it to a different standard than many of the other much cheaper components I've reviewed. This is the most expensive single piece of equipment that has made it to my system for testing so far in my time with the Absolute Sound. However, as an all-in-one unit, it does actually prove ripe for comparison with my reference system, which, when you account for digital, preamp, and amp, is about equal in price. My reference system, for reference, contains an Inuos Zenith Mark III streamer, Denafrips Pontus 2 DAC, Backert Labs Rumba Extreme preamplifier, and Hagel H30 power amp. These components at full retail combine to about $31,000 US, which is actually very, very, very close to the Aavik U-288. In a broad sense, these two systems contrasted a lot in flavor. With my reference system, I thought it presented a smoother sonic picture with a slightly juiced up but far more open mid-range, sweeter treble, and more thickness and body to the sound. The Aavik Unity had a soundstage as wide and deep as my reference, and in some ways it produced a bigger scale of stage. But overall, on the Aavik, I heard details come out more directly. It felt like it was showing me the details, and not that they weren't really necessarily unraveling quite as naturally as my reference system. It had more of an off-the-board, in the studio feeling. Details were good on both systems, but my reference system focused more on space around the performers and how they interacted with said space, where the Aavik was much more concerned with what was going on kind of at ground level, so to speak. The thing that I really liked, however, about the Aavik was how black the backgrounds were, and because of that silence of noise and image, it made every entrance of a musical line or vocal, it was just eerie and magical. And when the dynamics would come in, or when things would enter, or when there were this shock or surprise of instrumental swells, because that background was so black and there was just no noise in the sound, it came out so vividly and strongly, and dynamics sounded bigger. If I had to speak in broad strokes, the Aavik it's a more studio-focused sound. It really lives in the details of the music. It is also incredibly bold and daring with its snappy transients, huge dynamic swings, and spotlit instrumental presentation. It is a little drier than what I'm used to. It's a sound that is a little more direct than it is airy or spacious. However, that dryness should not be interpreted as me saying this amplifier is harsh or fatiguing. It isn't, and the treble is miraculously, it's free of the kinds of artifacts that a lot of times I will just unintentionally associate with Class D amps. Rather, the sonic point I'm making is that this amplifier is revealing and a little less than forgiving of some source material. There are definitely recordings that on my reference system sound satisfying to me that I do kind of hear the flaws in, at least with greater clarity when I'm listening on the Aavik. It's not a romantic presentation, it's one that strips away the noise to render music in a crystalline clarity and athletic flexibility. The Aavik U-288 is not just a reference quality integrated amplifier, it's a reference quality music system. And when you understand this, then its $30,000 price tag is a little bit easier to understand. If the minimalist in you is craving a single box solution, this is one that could truly claim it is without compromise in sonics and features. The U-288 is whisper quiet, with musical passages exploding from its black abyss with exciting clarity and speed, demanding that you sit up and pay attention, something I found myself doing repeatedly. If that sounds like what you're looking for in your hi-fi experience, giving the Aavik U-288 a demo might prove fruitful. But those are just my thoughts, and we would also like to hear yours. So please leave a comment down below, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons so that more audio reviews like this one show up right in your feed. I'm Michael Johnson with the Absolute Sound, and I'll see you all in the next review.